Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Corda Lebuck. Here you'll find the best tips on cybersecurity and how you can stay safe online. And as already announced, today's video is about the Tor browser, about the Tor browser Onion project, and how you can use this browser in everyday life, what advantages it offers, and how you can access the dark web with it in case that's something you're interested in. I also want to show you the difference between the deep web and the dark web. So I'd say let's not waste any more time and get started right away. All right, so I'm here in the Tor browser for now, and there is one very important note, Maury, that I definitely want to give you right now, because I know that some people these days also really like to use Brave for their browsing, and Brave offers the function to open Tor browser windows. However, that is not exactly the same as the Tor browser itself. Here, it's simply an anonymous window, just like the private incognito search window is opened, which is quite a bit better because your data is encrypted through the Tor network. And yes, your browsing history is more or less encrypted, but it's just not the same. And Brave does not save any browser activity at that moment. With private windows using Tor connectivity, it becomes harder for websites to obtain your real IP address and for network observers to know which website you are visiting. But it is not exactly the same thing, and it doesn't use the same nodes. It's just kind of a bit different there. And what's very important to know is, as far as I am aware, it is actually significantly faster in most cases, but it simply doesn't offer you all the same features as the Tor browser. It really routes the website or the websites themselves through multiple nodes, encrypts it, and gives you a different IP address. Because the important thing is that you still keep the Brave IP address at the moment. And here, I'm just opening an anonymous Tor browser window. That's something you really should know. And I would also recommend that you don't use this, but instead actually use the Tor browser itself. Brave is certainly a very good and reliable browser. It also offers some very good data protection and privacy features for its users, but it's not necessarily perfectly suited for this specific purpose we are discussing. And now we'll move straight on to the Tor browser instead. I am currently inside the interface of the Tor browser. And the very first thing I see here is the message, explore privately with the DuckDuckGo search engine. So whenever we start up this browser, we can perform any search we want using the DuckDuckGo engine. Now that's also easily available in a regular web browser, right? And you can kind of imagine the entire internet, like a massive, deep floating iceberg. Right on the surface is the vast, visible, everyday public web. The normal web, like Google, Bing, and all the other search engines. Here you don't see any hidden aspects lying below the water's surface. Here, at the surface, as I said, are Google and all those other search engines, as well as all the content on the internet that's publicly available. And below the much larger part is the deep web. The deep web simply means everything that's not publicly accessible. That could be from a university, from an intranet, or from a company, but these can also be URLs that have never been shared publicly for whatever reason. And the dark web itself is only a very small fraction of that entire space. As the name suggests, it's in the dark, hidden far down below, and it's not so easy to access. And that's important to know because the other things are relatively easy to access. And I could also access it relatively easily here if, for example, I get in touch with this university and gain access to their intranet, then I also have the URL and access to it. It's very important to know the difference between the deep web and the dark web. They're not the same because many people always think they're the same, but that's actually not true. The dark web is really that part, this online marketplace for criminals, where drugs are traded or fake identities are sold, email addresses are sold, but also where cryptocurrencies are traded. And yes, some even offer ransomware as a service, operating like a company, networking and exchanging information among themselves, presenting their offerings. You can imagine it like eBay, but without the auction part. It's actually a bit more like Amazon, where people simply offer their products, everyone can see these offers, and then get in touch with those individuals. That's the basic principle that's often portrayed in many films and documentaries, but it's not that simple, believe me. I once tried it myself, but from a completely different background and with a completely different approach in 2020. I wanted to find secret information about the topic of COVID and vaccination, and it was very difficult to find anything at all. The books and all that other information were all publicly accessible anyway, But here in the dark web itself, I was unable to find anything at all. And what's also crucial for you to understand is that a fully encrypted connection is currently being utilized here across several of the nodes. Right now, it's consistently starting here in Germany because I made the mistake of selecting German as the language, so it automatically defaults to Germany. That's not ideal. It then also switches directly to Austria and Sweden. Earlier, I briefly had the Netherlands. You can also establish a new connection, and then a new channel is created here. But in principle, you should know that there is an encrypted connection here through several nodes. What is the difference compared to a VPN? With a VPN, you can decide for yourself that you want to mask your IP address and specifically say, I want to establish a connection channel, a tunnel via Sweden now, and then it becomes more difficult to identify you. But in principle, both work in a relatively similar way. The primary objective of this approach is to mask your actual IP address and ensure that it becomes considerably more difficult to identify you online. Because if you use Chrome or Brave, then it's actually the case that everyone knows, okay, that's the IP address of such and such a person, and they live in Munich. And then you can find that person relatively quickly. And it's also crucial for you to understand that every web address has this onion at the end. So that means it's not a standard everyday web address like brotonmail.com or .de, but rather this masked URL with a long string of numbers and letters that concludes specifically with onion login, or generally ends with onion. And that's important. Who is this browser actually interesting for? For my target group, for small business owners, this might not be that interesting. And also for people working from home, it's probably less interesting, I'd say. It's mainly interesting for people who need to do journalistic work and research in countries where they're not allowed to do certain things or where certain opinions and theses are not permitted, so to speak. This Tor browser provides a certain degree of anonymity. So, as I said, it's interesting for anyone who is conducting research or doing journalistic work, but it's also interesting for anyone who really wants to stay anonymous, who wants to conduct anonymous research. Like in my case, for example, on the topic of COVID and vaccine injuries or the topic of vaccination in general. Of course, you could also use a search engine like Startpage or Quant, for example, which also don't create a profile of you. But it's kind of funny to know that you can still track what you've Googled and what you've searched for. Here, it's the case that your search history can't be checked or can only be checked with considerable difficulty. That's how it is, yes. And that's exactly the point. Not to use this browser as your everyday browser because, as you can already tell, it's pretty slow, especially when recording video. I couldn't use it for everyday work right here in Germany, especially since the internet is slower anyway. It's very difficult, and it is also not really intended to be an everyday browser, but simply a browser you can use for specific research tasks while protecting your privacy. It protects your data privacy and keeps you anonymous, but, and now comes the downside, you can actually use it to access the dark web. And there's a really good site here. You can take a look at it if you like. Just search for the best search engines on the dark web or the 10 best search engines on the dark web, exactly 2026. DrGo is actually listed there as well. And Aima, which is quite well known. I had already known about it for a while. Unfortunately, Torch is no longer included. It used to be a major search engine. But actually, here it is. Torch is still there. It's also quite well known. But for the average person, these search engines are probably not very familiar. Most people know Google and maybe Bing, and that's about it. So really, only people who have dealt with the topic of the dark web, Tor browser, or cybersecurity know about this. And I already knew about it from earlier, from my training. Because the topic interested me as an office clerk back then, and of course later on as well. You inevitably come across it in the field of cybersecurity as well. So you can access these Onion search engines just like normal, and right now I'm on Onion Find, but don't think it's too easy. So I can just enter any example here. Maybe this isn't the best example, like someone selling ransomware. Okay, well, maybe someone in Russia. You actually come across things like that quite often. And that's basically how the dark web works in the first place, by offering these kinds of services. So let's try and see if you can buy email addresses. I have never really been the type for doing criminal activities, so I don't really know what I should enter here to buy some kind of illegal service. Probably buying Bitcoin isn't the best example either. It's more about trading with Bitcoin. Yeah, you can already see that I'm not having any luck here because I just don't have the mindset to even know what I could enter here to find something illegal. And that's also the tricky part about the dark web, knowing what you can actually buy. Maybe I'll have better luck here with AI. I'll just try it with the old keyword, Corona. There were no listener results found if I just enter online funds. And that is exactly how it always was in the past, no matter what specific topics I entered. It was very difficult to get any URLs at all. I tried several things. As I said, that was a topic I was particularly interested in, getting information, secret information about Corona. And I don't think the dark web is the right place for that. For that, you really have to do some extensive and thorough research, like with today's AI search engines, and use the dark web much less frequently. You can really think of the dark web more as a place where you can easily find criminal services or connect with others who offer such things. And as I said, it's very difficult to get access to these URLs here. To be honest, I really have no idea what I could enter here so that you could buy something. Credit cards? Yes, that might actually work. Here we already have something about credit cards and yoga market help forum. Now, again, it's a forum here. That's likely Rains on Bear is selling. Union Market, all dollars, oils, Onion Darknet, deep web news, direct links, and drugs. Honestly, it would already be far too much for me to dig through all of that information. To go through everything and see what it actually is. In the vast majority of cases, it's really true. We are talking about online forums here. And the crucial thing here, to fully understand how things work in the dark web, is that you first have to sign up, just like in a standard everyday public forum. And maybe even introduce yourself, start establishing connections with others, or at least you should, so that the whole thing can actually work for you. Yes, exactly, you could buy illegal weapons here. Why did I immediately think of that? Oh, right, I don't need any weapons. Buying weapons and things like that. Well, I do find it interesting, of course, but you usually need some way, like an actual gun license for that. And as I said, here you can get all these things illegally get drugs, illegally get weapons. But it's not that easy, as they say, to actually find something here online. For example, to buy a rifle or a pistol. The main problem in the dark web, of course, is whether you can pay with Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency. That's also easy. They are not going to offer PayPal. And cash is obviously extremely difficult to manage if the person is located much farther away. That's why, in most cases, payment is actually made with Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency. Yeah, now we've already found something interesting here. Weapons are being offered here. You can see them here for several $1,000s. These are nice rifles. You can actually add them to your card or probably contact the seller as well. And you get these weapons sent to you once you pay for them. It's like this. I don't know if it's always reliable or if there are also bad actors, like on Etsy, but apparently it usually works. You then transfer them the money and receive these weapons by mail. But something you should also keep in mind is, here it's in dollars. What about customs? And so on. That's something you really need to pay attention to. You need to specifically check where it's coming from. Maybe it's easier to get if it's within Europe. These are all things you have to consider. But now we've successfully discovered our very first online digital storefront for weapons. Even though this seems to be a shop based in the United States of America, at least you can see that they're active on Telegram. You can send them an email and maybe also investigate the details of how you can pay or not. There's nothing else to it here. Normally I'd see a paywall here or credit card options and so on, but otherwise you could even access FAQs here, which is really interesting. Yeah, so In any case, it is definitely possible to get involved in such illegal and borderline businesses. Although I would say this isn't all that explosive. Yes, of course it's still illegal to carry a weapon if you don't have a gun license, but it's not as bad as drug trafficking or dealing in fake identities and credit card theft. Here you can see how the whole thing is shipped. As I said, from the United States, Europe, and Australia. Okay, that's possible with guarantee and so on. And all the questions that you answer here in advance, you get responses to. And of course, there are actually good reviews for these people on the dark web. No question about it, because it works, like I said, just like on eBay or Amazon. So of course you also get recommendations. You connect via Telegram. You have a contact person, just like in a normal online shop, no question. And that actually works for pretty much any other topic as well. I could also type into this search bar here, I don't know, something like the illegal purchase of an ID, or the purchase of a stolen credit card, some other variety of illicit service in any case. And yes, I think that was this market. With these weapons, that was now via AIMA. And of course, you really need to be creative there. I think you also have a much higher chance of success. I keep thinking in German, as you can tell, if you enter everything in English and then clearly specify exactly what you are looking for right here. This even works across Europe. Okay, very good. And even in Germany with Bitcoin, yes, very good. For me, of course, it is logically the most practical option to shop in Germany or Europe, but as a matter of fact, in general, it is, of course, sensible to enter your own country like the USA or the UK and then really pay attention to what payment methods are accepted and what the shipping costs are, just like with a regular online shop. And I still see it in the tokens that it gets shipped relatively securely. I honestly can't really imagine it in real life, but then it just... a stable connection has been established. It does get somewhat obscured, so to speak. And that's also the problem. It's actually quite easy to get into the dark web. People always think it's something really special, but basically it's just about seeing what works, where there are online shops, and what online forums I can find. Who can I exchange information with? What is available on their Telegram channels? All these things, right? Did it just kick me off the internet or what? No. Okay, let's keep going. Now something's happening. That was like Goy or whatever it was called. I can't even read that fast, you know? Like Gofi. And here again, we have an online shop from a provider on the dark web, it seems, but it's taking way too long to load. Yeah, it is an online shop. At least it looks like an online shop. For weapons or whatever it's supposed to be. Well, I entered weapons and credit cards. Those are, of course, the number one things. These are some kind of medications, probably for or against corona. That would be something too. Certain things that weren't available online, or rather offline, certain medications or anything that was specifically recommended during corona, you really have to be careful with that, of course. And also with medications, in general, I would be very cautious about ordering anything there. But of course, that works as well for medications, drugs, and so on. Yeah, that's definitely the case now. Drugs, as it seems, are definitely being sold here. And as you can see, it's relatively easy to access such shops here. Of course, I can't judge how trustworthy the whole thing is. As I said, you can try it out with any search engine. Those were Ama and Onion just now. Find. There are also Onion links here. With these, you can specifically research links on the dark web. We've already talked about the dark web. That's the classic search engine, which is also publicly available. Then there's also Recon. Recon is a new search engine that focuses on time-entered data on overlay networks used for underground activities. Yes, for underground activities. These are all, let's say, underground activities that are not exactly what you would call legal. Recon. Onion Wiki. This is more like, well, Wikipedia. Here too, it's a collection of links from various forums, from various online forums. and from several shops that you can then access. That's actually quite interesting because there are really links here that actually work. Then there's the Torworks search engine, the form web. On web, the services are very easy to use, especially for beginner users. Many users consider it the most powerful search tool for hidden web markets. Haystack. And to be honest, right now I'm searching for darknet. Search, darknet search, torch. Does it still exist? I once heard in forums that it was discontinued, but that was quite a while ago, probably 1 or 2 years, but it seems to still exist. And here too, as I said, it's the same principle. You can enter your query here. And then, just like we can see right here, a variety of different online forums or various digital shops will be displayed, each featuring a direct link and a URL, which you can then click on to check for your convenience. Here, it's primarily about archives, people buying weapons on the darknet, people buying weapons online. That might be quite interesting. And that's basically how you have to imagine it. It's really an endless search. It's not like Google or Bing. You don't get great suggestions. You can't just keep searching. You don't get similar search results. Instead, you really have to do a lot of your own research and try things out yourself. Now, here we somehow have an illegal podcast, coincidentally. Honestly, it's new to me that there are podcasts in the dark web, but what I do know is that there are also online forums, that there's social media, that there's even Facebook in the darknet, or generally social networks where people can exchange information. All these things that are not so easy to access. That was now this. No, that wasn't it at all. And unfortunately, many URLs just don't work. I don't know why, because they get taken offline. That's also a problem, I would say, that doesn't really exist on the regular internet. Of course, sometimes you get 404 errors and so on. But these links are really taken offline and then they're gone and unusable. And that's why it's a real hassle to actually check and open all these links. As I said, it just wasn't for me. It was focused almost entirely on the subject matter of corona and clandestine scientific research, if I may call it that, and less about criminal activities. It's just not fun anymore on Torch either. Maybe he just entered the wrong keyword somehow. But in principle, and to sum up, you're welcome to take a closer look at this site here. As I said, there are several search engines here, including the Darknet search engine, but the best known ones are mainly Torch AIMA and what was the other one? Yeah, Onion Find is actually also well known, or rather Onion Wiki, where you can gather all these links together. And that's exactly how this Darknet search works. But you really do need contacts here and useful directory links so that you can actually experience the benefits of using the dark web safely and effectively in the first place. Where was it? I just saw it a moment ago. Shall we try it again here? This one is even made in Switzerland? Interesting. Oh, now I have to enter the domain here right away. Not bad either. Okay, so you obviously need a domain right away for that. That's difficult. And that's actually generally the case, that you don't work here like you do with normal search engines, but rather with targeted keywords, or more specifically with targeted names, I would almost say. It could also be, for example, the name of an online forum. And as I said, with targeted links. And that's what's difficult about the dark web itself, finding your way around, and as a result, navigating. Yes, here you have all these link collections. You can take a look at them and read through the guide. But what's really important here is this overview of the dark web search engines. That's good. As you saw, it works. It's actually pretty easy to get into the dark web itself, and it's also pretty easy to access it. These search engines work, even through a normal Google search. But what is truly difficult, and I don't want to sugarcoat this, is really finding those online forums that are actually active and well maintained, finding those online shops that are still running well, and then once you are in the dark web scene, the challenge is getting out again. If, for example, I only intend to order a weapon once and then never again, then that's okay. And maybe no one will ever find out about it. But if I keep ordering things over and over again, and if I keep getting in touch with these people, I might end up getting caught up in a kind of spiral. And that actually happens to a lot of people, that they end up in these networks of hackers and other online criminals, and it's pretty hard to get out again. Maybe it doesn't even have to be hacker-related crime. It could just be that you keep intending to order certain things from this online shop. Just like on the black market, these things aren't publicly accessible, and that's why the dark web exists. But first and foremost, of course, it's illegal. What is not illegal about the dark web, and with this, I'd actually like to wrap up today's video, is that it's not illegal to use the Tor browser. Absolutely not, on the contrary. It's also not illegal to access these web search engines in the dark web and search for something. It only becomes illegal once you engage in an activity that cannot or is not allowed to take place on the standard legal open market. So, for example, you upload something to sell and hire a company to attack another company. Or, for instance, ordering dangerous weapons, dealing illegal drugs, and paying with cryptocurrencies. Although it's not illegal to pay with cryptocurrencies, it is specifically illegal to pay for these kinds of offers with cryptocurrencies. And cryptocurrencies, this is very important and I want to mention it here, are absolutely not anonymous, even though that's often promised. Of course, there are cryptocurrencies like Monero that are more anonymous than Bitcoin, but in theory, it might still be possible to trace them. And the dark web is really the only thing that offers protection in that regard, allowing you to act anonymously and assume an anonymous identity at that moment. To a certain extent, of course, because you also have to live with the knowledge of going into the dark web and carrying out these activities, whatever the motivation may be. That is certainly true as well, but as I have said before, you can also use the Tor browser quite casually and easily, without having any malicious intentions in mind, simply for your own private purposes, for private research, or for anonymous research, and in fact, many professional journalists primarily use it to conduct certain investigations, which then take place over this highly encrypted network, through these various nodes, so that it becomes much more difficult, or ideally even completely impossible, to trace your identity or location back to you. In countries where you are not allowed to write, say, or do certain things, however it may be, it's obviously a good thing that projects like the Tor browser exist. And here in Germany, as I said, there are also other good browsers that take data protection and privacy seriously. Brave Firefox. I've already made several videos about them as well. This is now finally the last video about the last browser. With this, the topic of browser security comes to an end. And of course, I'm happy